Today we have Dr. Tom coming back on the podcast for the second time. He's got some really cool work coming down in the pipeline here. He's got a new docu-series coming out. And in this episode, we touched on the topic of low-grade inflammation and how we can all be walking around with this low-grade inflammation, how it leads to disease, and why it's not good enough to wait to get testing until you have problematic symptoms.
Exactly. Yes. It's this hidden low grade inflammation that he touches on so well. He uses anecdotes, such a wonderful storyteller, and he sprinkles in research to illustrate these points. So I found it engaging, Melissa. I think our listeners will too. So let's get right to it and jump in and hear more from Dr. Tom. Hello and welcome. I'm Dr. Emmy Brown, and I'm here with my fantastic co-host, Melissa Gentile. Today, we are honored to welcome back Dr. Tom O'Brien. Dr. Tom is not only a world-renowned functional medicine educator, but he is also a sought-after speaker, author, and global leader on gluten sensitivity. His popular books, The Autoimmune Fix and You Can Fix Your Brain, appeal to health-minded people and holistic medicine providers alike. And his website, thedoctor.com, is a treasure trove of functional medicine education and resources you'll want to revisit again and again. As of late, Dr. Tom is spreading the word on his new docu-series, The Inflammation Equation, Decoding the Path to Optimal Well-Being, wherein he explores why our children may not live as long as us and the underlying mechanisms behind the development of 14 of the top 15 causes of death characterized by dysfunction that is oftentimes hidden or dismissed until it's too late. He interviews experts including doctors Terry Walls, Jeffrey Bland, and Kara Fitzgerald, amongst many others. I am so excited to learn more on this topic. So let's welcome back Dr. Tom. Dr. Tom, thank you so much for being here again and welcome.
Thank you, Dr. Emmy. Real pleasure to be with you. Thank you so much.
Absolutely. So let's just kick it off. I'd love to know what motivated you to make this docuseries. Was there a specific event even that inspired this project?
Yes, actually. The event occurred maybe 15 years ago, but it's bothered me, and I sometimes wake up in cold sweats thinking about it. When I had my practice in Chicago, I always had 6 massage therapists working, all part-time, but there was always 2 massage therapists there because we were a functional medicine musculoskeletal practice. And one of our massage therapists, her husband, a wonderful, wonderful man, about 5'2", 5'3", he was a janitor at a local grade school. And I'd see, Ray would come to the group gatherings, 4th of July picnic or something, and I'd say, hey, nice to see you, Ray. And Ray, come on in, let's do a blood test. I really want to check you for cardiovascular risk. And he'd say, oh, my doctor says I'm fine. I'm just fine. Thanks so much, doc. I appreciate it. But, my cholesterol's not too bad. I'm on the medication. It's not too bad. And I said, but you don't need to be on medication and we can find out what's going on. Oh, my doctor says I'm fine. But Ray had these creases in his ears. And if you know about earlobe creases, and for those that don't, just Google earlobe creases and cardiovascular disease. Here come the studies. And I've got 13 in my library. There's probably more by now. I've not looked in a number of years of the correlation between these creases in the lobe of the ears and higher risk of coronary artery disease. So Ray never came. And then Ray showed up one day. Hey, doc, I thought I'd do that blood test. Oh, okay, Ray. Really happy. It was a busy day. I didn't talk to him much, just drew the blood and said, we'll have the results back in 2 days. Come on back. He said, okay, doc, see ya. And Ray drove home and he pulled over on the side of the freeway and he died of a massive coronary.
Wow.
After that, I developed the moniker, not on my watch will that ever happen again. I was too nice a guy. Okay, Ray, whatever you want, but you really should come in. I was too nice. And I tell doctors on stage all the time, stop being nice. You're not their friend. They come to you because you're the expert. And if you have a suspicion, be kind, not nice. Nice is, I don't want to offend anybody. I want to make sure they come back. That's being nice. Kind is authenticity with compassion. Be kind. Say what you need to say, but make sure they clearly understand. And then it's up to them. And I wake up every once in a while, in the middle of the night, just thinking about Ray. Right? So ever since then, I've been working on being kind. Right? And when I'm on stage, I just notice there is a paradigm that very few of us in integrative, holistic, functional medicine, very few of us operate from the paradigm of what's the root cause of all disease. We talk about root cause medicine and, it's genetics. That's the root cause. No, it's not. There are many, many causes to disease. There are many causes. There's one root mechanism. And that's what we all forget. There's one mechanism. 14 of the 15 top causes of death, according to the CDC, are chronic inflammatory diseases. It's always inflammation. But we don't look for the low-grade inflammation. We don't look for elevated antibodies unless they come in with symptoms of rheumatoid or Hashimoto's. Then we'll check for antibodies. But many of you already know that by the time they get a diagnosis of an autoimmune disease, it's been there for at least 7 years, sometimes 10, 12, 15 years of elevated antibodies, killing off tissue, killing off tissue, killing off tissue. But they didn't know. They said, well, I feel fine. I feel fine, meaning they're putting up with whatever's going on. When a patient says, I feel fine, that's a warning. That's really a warning because they come to you for health issues, and we just need to ask them clearly. We don't say, how you feeling today? You say, how's your body functioning? What's not quite up to par? You need point-specific directive communication so that they will answer you more openly and not give you the gobbledygook, I feel fine. And then you have to go searching to find a problem and convince them of why they're there, right? So that's what got me into this whole concept of low-grade chronic inflammation. And it was Melissa Arbuckle in 2003 that published in the New England Journal of Medicine a paradigm-shifting article that just changed my understanding. I finally had a tool to put my energy on this concept so that I've never had a Ray again, ever. No surprise deaths like that in my world. So she went to the VA and she looked for people with lupus. And she found 132 people in this one VA center with lupus. And if they're in a VA center, they're veterans. And if they're veterans, they were in the armed forces. And if they were in the armed forces, they had their blood drawn many times over the years while they were healthy in the Army, the Navy, the Marines, the Coast Guard, the Air Force. And what most people don't know is that our government has been saving and freezing almost all of that blood since 1978. They've got tens of millions of samples of our service people's blood. Arbuckle knew this, and so she asked for permission to go back and look at some of the stored blood of the currently diagnosed lupus patients when they were healthy in the Air Force or in Special Forces, Green Berets. It didn't matter what branch of the armed forces they were in. And she got permission, and what she found out, there are 7 antibodies to lupus, and what she found is that every single antibody was elevated above the normal range 5 years before they ever had a symptom. And some of the antibodies were elevated 9 years, 11 years before they ever had a symptom while they felt fine. But their immune system had been activated, trying to protect them from something, creating these elevated antibodies, which by definition, killing off tissue, killing off tissue, killing off tissue. So to put that into perspective for everyone, why is it normal to have antibodies to your thyroid? Why is there a normal reference range when you do a thyroid antibody test? And there is a normal range depending on the lab, 0 to 40, 0 to 36, somewhere in there. It's normal. What does that mean? It means you're, Mrs. Patient, you have an entire new body every few years. And in order for that to happen, you have to get rid of the old and damaged cells and make room for new cells. And we've heard of that process. Part of it's autophagy. And antibodies activate this whole autophagy process. So there's a normal level of antibodies to your thyroid, to the myelin on your nerves, to the collagen on your joints, to your brain tissue, to your adrenals. There's a normal level of antibodies. But when you are elevated, what does that mean? It means you're killing off more cells than you're making. By definition, that's what it means. This is like basic 101. But we don't think of this. So many of us, we get a test back and it says, oh, I see your antibodies for your thyroid at 56. Well, the normal range is to 36. That's not too bad. Let's just watch it and see. What are you waiting for? I mean, that's the definition. That's the definition of autoimmunity is elevated antibodies killing off tissue, right? So you're on the spectrum. And so Arbuckle did this, and everyone should download that article. It's free. Go to New England Journal of Medicine, Melissa Arbuckle, 2003 lupus, and it'll come right up. But it changes the way you think. That's why I love Vibrant so much, because finally we have and I'm not paid to do this, but finally we have a laboratory that has 97 to 100% sensitivity and specificity. So you can count on what you're getting, as accurate results. As long as a patient has total immunoglobulin levels in the normal range, this is an accurate test, right? I mean, so many of us, we get ANA antibodies back, or the patient comes in with a report of elevated ANA antibodies, and we don't know what to do with that. Well, wait a minute. If your body is making antibodies to the nucleus of your cell, anti-nuclear antibodies, well, which cells? Every cell, any cell. So wait a minute. Well, why would you have to ask, why is the immune system doing that? And this is really helpful to say to your patients in your own language or mine, Mrs. Patient, your immune system is just the armed forces in your body. It's there to protect you. There's an Army, a Navy, an Air Force, a Marines, a Coast Guard. We call them IgA, IgG, IgE, IgM, cytokines. They're different branches of the armed forces to protect you. So when you have an elevation, the basic question is, what is it trying to protect you from? Mm-hmm. This is not an immune system that's gone haywire. This is an immune system that's activated trying to protect you. And so we have to identify, what is it your immune system? Well, I've got elevated antibodies to myelin. Okay, so the question is, why do you have elevated antibodies to myelin? And so where do you look for that? Well, just Google myelin or antibodies to myelin and dairy. And here come the studies of molecular mimicry and how frequently someone that has antibodies to dairy can produce antibodies to myelin basic protein.
Just read your book. You can fix your brain. You have a whole book on it.
That's right. That's right. So this concept of low-grade chronic inflammation, my job here and what we're focusing on, what we've been focusing on for almost a year now in interviewing 7 different countries I've gone to, the real world experts. Yehuda Schoenfeld in Israel, the godfather of autoimmunity. And by that, I mean many, many medics go to Tel Aviv University to get their PhD in immunology. And 26 of them, there are many more, but 26 of them at last count chair departments of immunology in medical schools and hospitals around the world. They're his students, so he's the godfather. And, he and I shared the stage in Rome in December, and he made this comment. It's like, what? So he starts off, he leans up against the podium into the microphone, and he says, "We are born 99% human." Okay, what does he mean? Then he explained the newborn infant does have some microbiota in his gut. Mom has inoculated the baby a little bit. Baby is not sterile. And then, of course, natural childbirth is supposed to be a further inoculation. But if that doesn't happen and baby's born by C-section, they still have a little bit of bacteria in their gut at birth. We're born 99% human, okay? And we've all heard that there's 10 times more cells of bacteria in us than there are human cells. You know, we've all heard, oh, that's interesting. And then it goes right past us. Nobody thinks about, well, what does that mean? So Schoenfeld's comment, we are born 99% human and we die 90% microbial. It's like, what? Well, yeah, I guess I knew that. But if you think about it, you know, my first mentor was Dr. George Goodhart, the founder of applied kinesiology. And George used to say, look with eyes that see, listen with ears that hear. And I had no idea what he meant at the time. Now I know. What is Schoenfeld trying to tell us in that statement? And then I interviewed him later and I got it all down and it comes out in the inflammation equation. But what he's saying, so I said, so Professor Schoenfeld, you said on stage today, we're born 99% human and we die 90% microbial. Yes. Well, doesn't that mean or suggest that the dance of life for humans is how we interact with the microbial world? And he said, precisely. That most people won't understand that until, you know, we lay it out, that the dance of life, you want vitality. The primary contributor to your vitality in life is your microbiome. 36% of all the small molecules in the healthy bloodstream are the metabolites of the microbiome. Over 1/3 of everything in the bloodstream, all the small molecules is, and Mrs. Patient, if I exercise too hard and my muscles sore the next day, I know that that's just lactic acid. You know, it's just the exhaust of my muscle cells and I made too much lactic acid and I couldn't flush it out. Drink some water and I'll be fine in a day or two, right? They say, oh yeah, I've heard of that before. Okay. Well, the bacteria in your gut make exhaust. The exhaust are called the metabolites of the microbiome. They include things like short-chain fatty acids, nucleic acids, DNA remnants. It's just the exhaust of the microbiome. Okay. 36% of all the small molecules in your bloodstream are the exhaust of the microbiome. Well, what does that mean? It means that and the geek word, Mrs. Patient, is modulates. So what that means is that the metabolites of your microbiome have their hands on the steering wheel of where your body's going. It modulates. That's what modulates means. It means has its hands on the steering wheel, the direction of your health. I mean, it was Michael Gershon in 1999 from Princeton when he wrote the book, The Second Brain. And he told us for every one message from the brain going down, telling the gut what to do, there are 9 messages from the gut going up, telling the brain what to do. The ratio is 9-1. We've known that for 20 years now. Well, this is part of the mechanism by which that occurs, is the metabolites of the microbiome from the gut are putting exhaust into the bloodstream that go up and regulate our neurotransmitter ratios. Those are your brain hormones, Mrs. Patient. They're not really hormones, but to understand it, they're like hormones. That neurotransmitter balance is modulated by the microbiome. You have cognitive dysfunction or anxiety or depression or schizophrenia, part of the protocol to bring that back into balance is fix your gut, because the messages are coming from the gut balancing or imbalancing your neurotransmitters. So our goal, I'll stop in just a minute. I'm on a roll. But
It's okay.
our goal here in the inflammation equation is to educate every attendee on this concept that it's this low-grade inflammation that's partially in your gut, many other places, but partially in your gut, that sends these messages to your brain, in this example that I'm giving you now, that throws your neurotransmitters out of balance, and then your daughter's got depression. And so, yes, if you need some medication, you use the medication, but you also have to examine the gut and bring balance back to the gut to bring balance back to the brain. And patients go, oh, okay, that makes sense. I understand why I need to include the gut in my work here. But, the problem's in my head, doc, but okay, that kind of makes sense to me. So that's our goal, is to send patients back to the doctors, back to the clinicians, asking more engaging questions like, we're going to break the ice so they understand these concepts. And I want them coming back to you and saying, Doc, should I do that Neural Zoomer Plus test? Should I see if there's inflammation in my brain? Or, should I do that total tox burden test to see if I have mycotoxins or heavy metals or volatile organic compounds in my body? I want them coming back to you asking those questions. That's our goal. And every day, there's 9 episodes. Every day, we're saying multiple times, go back to the healthcare practitioner that referred you to this event. Go back and ask these questions and figure out, where is my child's inflammation coming from that's manifesting as attention deficit?
Mm-hmm.
And I showed the study that children with drug-resistant epilepsy, which means they've tried at least 3 medications and nothing's working, they still have seizures, 50% of children with drug-resistant epilepsy go into complete remission on a gluten-free diet. 50%.
It's huge.
Well, why didn't my neurologist tell me that? Because it's published in the journal Gastroenterology. And neurologists don't read gastroenterology journals.
Oops.
They read neurology journals, right? So it's that kind of information we're giving to the patients every day by interviewing the experts that we have gone after.
I love how you paint this full circle picture of advocating for patients, getting patients to advocate for themselves, getting providers to advocate for this information, to coordinate care with other specialists. We need to speak to one another. And if there's something wrong, especially if it's a parent and child struggling with something like ADHD or autism, asking these questions, they know their child best. So
yes. And everyone's probably heard already that life expectancy has gone down for the first time in history of humans. Newborns born today are expected to live 2.3 years less than their parents' expected lifespan. And every autoimmune disease is going up 4 to 9% a year. What we're doing is not working. And we're dancing around the edges of dealing, we chase the symptoms. And what's the major problem? If there is one major problem, if there's only one test, well, no, that's not true, because the one test would always be the gut Zoomer, because that's the most important thing people can do to have the biggest effect on their health, is rebuild a healthy microbiome, in my opinion. But maybe the second most important test is the total tox burden. There are so many toxins now in our body. Just Google and look at phthalate levels in pregnant women and offspring IQ.
Oh, I don't want
and the
to.
IQs go down.
Yeah.
I mean, it's terrible. It's terrible. So we have to get to these women of childbearing age, and we have to educate them that they have to detox before they ever get pregnant. And it's not a 2-week program or 2 bottles of something. It's 6 months to a year to get this stuff out of the body. How do you know? Just do the tests. And when the tests come back normal, you're done. But you'll be shocked when you do a total tox burden, Well, my patient doesn't want to pay for the retest. Well, then you just tell the patient, Mrs. Patient, you had this high level in the first test. Now, should you get pregnant, and if there's any of this mercury left in there, here are the studies that show your baby's brain may not develop properly. It's up to you. You either do the test to confirm that I'm glad you feel great. I'm glad your acne's gone. I'm glad your migraines are gone. But part of your reason of being here is you want to have a healthy pregnancy. So if you don't do the retest and you still have high levels, because it takes 6 months to a year to get this stuff out of the body, aggressively working at it. If you still have high levels, your baby's future is completely at risk. And you say it the way you want to say it, but that's what you have to say. Stop being nice. Be kind. So excuse me, but you just have to see a couple of kids whose brains don't work very well from birth, and you say, oh man, I wonder if, ... I wonder if. You just have to see that a couple of times.
Puts it into perspective. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Dr. Tom, I know we're talking about toxins here and the important role that they play, but I know you mentioned earlier nutrition also plays a really huge role in controlling inflammation. We've all heard, every bite is either fighting disease or feeding disease. So can you share insights just on how diet influences inflammation?
Really good question. Thank you. And I'll give you a study that's a jaw dropper, really jaw dropper. So everyone knows the more fruits and vegetables you eat, the better. Everybody knows that, right? No. In the Journal of the American Medical Association in 2019, a paper came out of Harvard, and the editors of the journal made a comment. They said, this is an elegant study using sophisticated biomarkers to demonstrate their point. Now, the editors of the journal, the American Medical Association, don't say that very often. That's rare. I mean, this is such a politically oriented venue that we're in. You get published in JAMA, you've scored. That's a feather in your cap, right? So they don't give those types of stamps of approval very often, but they did in this case. And this was a study looking at couples going to assisted fertility centers. And as everyone knows, couples that are going through that, it's extremely stressful for them. Mm-hmm. And they're spending tens of thousands of dollars, just wanting to have a healthy pregnancy, a healthy delivery, healthy baby, and beautiful family. I mean, it's just wonderful what the goal is, but the process is terrible. So they looked at couples at assisted fertility centers, and they ruled out all of the known factors that may contribute to problems. They ruled out cigarette smoking. They ruled out alcohol consumption. They ruled out exercise, no exercise, socioeconomic class, race. They ruled it all out in an elegant way using sophisticated biomarkers that you can't argue with. This, once again, this came from Harvard. And they looked at one thing. How many servings of fruits and vegetables is the woman eating a day during this period of attempted inseminations, implantations? And they divided the answer for each woman into fourths, the lowest, the next, the third, and the highest. And we all know the more fruits and vegetables, the better. No. Those in the highest category of servings of fruits and vegetables per day compared to those in the lowest category of servings of fruits and vegetables per day, those in the highest category had an 18% less likelihood of successful implantation. 18% less. And if they did get pregnant, they had a 26% less likelihood of a live birth. They had 26% more miscarriages and stillbirths. The more fruits and vegetables you eat, the worse the outcome. Now that's
a shocking
like
outcome.
What? That's what? What?
Yeah, I don't know what to say. I'm speechless.
And once again, the editors of the journal said this is an elegant study using sophisticated biomarkers to demonstrate their point. You can't argue with the study. So here's the good news. There was a subcategory of women who were eating organic. And in that category, the results were the complete opposite. The more fruits and vegetables, the better the outcome, by far. And this is the really good news. This is the really good news. Women were put in the category of organic fruit and vegetable consumption if they were eating 3 servings per week. Not 3 servings a day. 3 servings a week. Why? Well, the researchers didn't pursue that any further, but I think, if you're trying to eat organic whenever you can, you also bought organic shampoo and you're using organic soap in the kitchen. You're doing the little things that you've learned already, and it's accumulative. It's the amount of chemicals in our bodies that have accumulated in the last 20, 30 years that I believe, and there's some good science behind it, is exponentially increasing all of the problems that we're having. It's the chemicals. It's the pesticides, fungicides, insecticides, antibiotics, glyphosates in your carrots and cucumbers and tomatoes and lettuce. Well, what vegetables are good for you? Not those vegetables. See, I think, and I don't know about this, I haven't found any evidence, and I'll always tell you if it's my opinion. I think the most sensitive tissue in the human body is a fertilized egg. It's got nothing to protect itself. Absolutely nothing. It's totally dependent on mom and mom's environment. But we've all heard there's 186 chemicals, the average in the placental blood or the umbilical cord blood at birth. Baby is swimming in a toxic soup. We've all heard this, but we don't know what to do about it. Look with eyes that see. Listen with ears that hear. And I'm intense right now. I know I am. That's my style on stage because I'm dealing with highly educated people that don't have a lot of time. They're not going to give me much time. So I'm doing boom, 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 boom. But in this event, it's really a slow pace asking these scientists these questions. Excuse me, Professor, did you just say yes? Well, does that mean yes? Wow, well, that's really interesting. So that would mean if I were to do this and this, my family would be more protected. Yes, that is correct. So it's that kind of a pace. It's not this boom, boom pace that I'm doing here with you. So please keep that in mind. This event is structured for the person that knows very little about healthcare and just wants to be healthier for them and their families. And it took me 3 months to come up with the title, the inflammation equation. There's an equation here. There's a formula that you have to do, and decoding the path to optimal well-being. That word just locked it in for me because there's so much information out there, it's overwhelming. When you learn that the phthalates in your plastic containers in the kitchen leach into your leftover food put in the refrigerator, and the next day the chicken's got phthalates in it. When you learn that nail polish, the phthalates in the nail polish that make the polish hard, they're in your bloodstream in 4 to 5 minutes. When you learn that every time you touch a credit card receipt, your blood BPA levels go up within 4 minutes when you touch a credit card receipt. And you learn, it's just overwhelming. It's just completely overwhelming. All of this information that people need to know. They need to know. But it's a little bit every day, done in a very gentle way so people can take notes. And we say, now go back to your healthcare practitioner and ask them, how do you check to see if the indoor air environment in your home is toxic? How would you do that? So we keep every day wanting to send them back to their practitioners. That's why we're inviting the practitioners to sign up as affiliates which means that at our website, you go to the inflammationequation.com/Brown.
That's
Brown?
right.
Yeah,
Yep.
Brown. Yeah. And the link will be there for you guys. But you go there and then you sign up as an affiliate and you see all of the handouts that you can mail out. You can change them any way you want. You can make it your own language. You can use ours. We got nice pictures and all that stuff. We've got Fran Drescher. But Fran is a 23-year survivor of uterine cancer,
Mm.
and she wanted to know why she got cancer. And she didn't believe what they told her. And she still sees her oncologist twice a year and says, that woman saved my life, and she's a very good friend now. She said, but she didn't know until I taught her, and she did her laugh, right? Yeah,
Amazing.
it was great. But Fran formed Cancer Schmancer. And Cancer Schmancer is to educate people about the toxicity of their homes, the toxicity of the food, and the toxicity of the environment that contributes to and feeds most cancers. And Fran's got all the science behind it. She's been doing this for years now, but people listen to her, and she talks so down to earth. Say, look, you have to be your own best friend. You have to take care of your body. Why aren't you treating it like a temple? She said, I was a cigarette smoker until my early 20s, and I realized, why am I so angry with my lungs that I would put such poison in there?
Mhm.
And then I stopped that day. And she tells the story. And her whole life now since then has been around, how do I treat my body like a temple? And I asked her, so Fran, what did you miss? What did you miss? And she said she had a traumatic experience. There was some violent trauma. And the next day, she just went to work like everything was fine and
Never
kept
processed
going.
it.
And 18 months later or so, she was diagnosed with uterine cancer,
Mm.
right? And she said, you must deal with the emotions. You must learn how to safely address what's going on, and not just in your body, but what's in your head. But just a beautiful, beautiful message to empower people to go back. And I told Fran before we started the interview, Fran, this is my goal, that they go back to their doctors. So she's in there saying, you go ask your doctor. You ask them about, and she just went into a whole checklist of things. So it's wonderful and very empowering. And I'm hoping will guide many, many people to ask more relevant questions and engage in conversation with their healthcare practitioner, not just walk in and say, I've got migraines, let's get rid of them.
Right.
But to say, I've got migraines, let's get rid of them. And why do I have migraines? I don't want them to
Challenge them a little
manifest
bit.
as something else. Right. So that's the goal. That's our
Right.
goal.
I'm wondering, Dr. Tom, you gave a fantastic analogy just now in terms of gut metabolites acting as exhaust. Everyone can imagine exhaust from a car inhaling this, maybe downwind. Um, is there another favorite analogy of yours or something you learned through making this docu-series to really illustrate inflammation and the importance for patients?
David Furman's at Stanford and also at the Buck Institute on Aging. Now, I'm going to date myself here, but I think it was back in the early 80s, there was a scientist named Roy Walford, and they built 2 geodesic domes out in the desert in Arizona. And these scientists lived in these 2 domes for 2 years. They never left. They had to deal with their own waste material. They had to grow their own food. They had to harvest their water, all of it. And David Furman was a senior grad student on the outside, coordinating everything and monitoring. So he's been involved in the aging process his entire career. NASA hired him to figure out, why are the astronauts aging in space so quickly? Because, humans can't go to Mars. Now, technology is such, it won't be long before the technology can allow us to go to Mars, but humans won't go. They'll die. They'll die of old age. It's just over a 2-year trip, I think, but the aging is accelerated in space. And Furman was hired to find out why, do all the research to find out why. So he published the papers that talked about its inflammaging. They came up with the term, these Italians, they came up with the term inflammaging, that the aging process is because of inflammation. And if you want to slow down and reverse the aging process, you've got to deal with this low-grade chronic inflammation. So Furman did this article. He published this article. It's a great article. And he has a drawing in the article. And I'm going to bring the drawing up on screen. And for those of you that are not watching, but you're listening, we'll describe it to you. So I'm going to bring this up now. So let me hit share screen here. So this is from David Furman's article. And what we have here, there are 3 gears that are connected. And, the tooth of one gear fits into the socket of the next one. And then the third gear fits into the socket of the middle one. So when you turn one gear, it turns the second gear, which turns the third gear. Mm-hmm. And on the left side, you have chronic infections, physical inactivity, obesity, dysbiosis, food selections, chronic stress and accumulated hormones, disturbed sleep, and xenobiotics. This is the environment that we are exposed to. And when that gear turns, it turns the middle gear, which is activating your immune system to produce this chronic systemic inflammation. And so now your immune system is producing inflammation to protect you from the chronic infections or the xenobiotics or the mercury or the dysbiosis, whatever it should be. So that middle gear is turning, and it turns the gear on the right, which is type 2 diabetes, metabolic syndrome, cardiovascular disease, cancer, depression, autoimmune diseases, neurodegenerative diseases. It doesn't matter. The chronic diseases that we're all dying from. So this drawing says it so clearly that it's our lifestyle on the left side of the drawing that activates the immune system trying to protect you, which then activates the wheel on the right side and wherever the weak link is in your chain. You pull at a chain, it breaks at the weakest link, always. It's at one end, the middle, the other end is your heart, your brain, your liver, your kidneys. Wherever your weak link is, that's where the chain's going to break. So it's our lifestyle and our exposures on that left side that activates the immune system, the middle gear, which then turns the gear on the right, the weak link on your chain, cardiovascular disease, cancer, neurodegenerative diseases, whatever it is. But it's always the immune system in the middle that's pulling on the chain, creating the inflammation that pulls on that chain, and your weak link is determined by your genetics and your antecedents. And Mrs. Patient, that's a geek word that just means how you live your life.
Right.
Because if you eat tuna fish 2-3 times a week, you likely have mercury toxicity because almost all the tuna's got mercury in it now. So that's an antecedent. So it's your genetics and your antecedents. Oh, by the way, I asked our scientists, please send me 5 studies on inflammation in your area of expertise, whether it's the gut or the cardiovascular system, the brain, whatever it was. Send me 5 studies that you think, and they might be a little geeky, but that certainly our clinicians would want to read, and maybe some patients would want to read. So we have a library that we're making available of about 40, I think it is, 40 studies. We're not charging for this. The whole event is free.
And Dr. Tom, throughout your career and all the research here, you've been really at the forefront of research into disease and inflammation. What has been, out of everything you've shared or not shared, what's been the most surprising or impactful discovery that you've made in your research? Like maybe something that is really going to shock the listeners.
Yeah, the conventional food versus organic food study with assisted fertility centers. That was jaw-dropping, just jaw-dropping. And we give them the answer. Buy organic whenever you can, and also get veggie wash. Get just a little spray of veggie wash when you come home from shopping. If you bought conventional broccoli, you spray it with the veggie wash and dip it in the water to rinse it off, and you've gotten rid of over 95% of the chemicals on that vegetable. Really simple things that you can do. Our executive producer for this is Truly Free, and which is just a wonderful company, toxin-free household products.
Oh, good. I was going
And
to ask, what's
and
in that spray, Dr. Tom? Do you know? Because I think listeners want to know, what should I buy? What should I not buy? I'm sure there's some questionable.
yeah, just go to trulyfree.com. You'll see it all. I don't know
Okay,
how they do that. That's not
perfect.
my thing.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it's good to
but I trust
defer
them
when
completely.
necessary. Yeah.
And they're so conscientious that when you order your first bottle of a detergent for your clothes,
Hmm.
comes in the big plastic jug, but never again. Your refills come in disposable, biodegradable paper containers,
Uh-huh.
and you just save the jug. You put the powder in there, add water to the top, and you keep using the same jug. And they have saved over 3 million jugs already that they've not produced and sold because they're using the refillable packets of biodegradable. It's that kind of thinking that
That's how
we
it
all
should
need
be.
to do.
I pulled up the site right now just to take a peek, Dr. Tom. It's got everything you need from kitchen, cleaning, refills, bathroom. It's got all the stuff on there.
Yes, yes. And they're very conscientious. His products are in my home for me and my family. That's how much we trust them.
I do want to talk a little bit about mental health as well. So there's a growing body of research linking inflammation to mental health issues. I know you touched on it slightly earlier, but from your perspective, like how significant is that link? I know you mentioned the gut earlier, but what implications does it have for treating conditions like anxiety and depression?
Either you read the science or you keep blinders on thinking the way you used to think. When you read the science, there's no doubt that dysbiosis is always present when you are suffering with depression, anxiety, schizophrenia, always present, always. You just have to read the science. Michael Mays, Maes, psychiatrist, well published, a few hundred articles, I think. And he was the first to coin the term the leaky gut diet. And it was gluten-free, dairy-free, added sugar-free. And this was back in the late 90s, I think, as a psychiatrist. And he was reversing major depression. Major depression means they're on 2 antidepressants and they still can't function. He's reversing it with the leaky gut diet. And you just start reading the science on this, or just Google schizophrenia and gluten. And
Yeah.
here come the studies. Not every um, schizophrenic benefits from a gluten-free diet, but so many of them do that it's always worth testing to see, should we try this? And now with Vibrant, you've got such accurate tests that you can't argue with the technology and the accuracy of it. So it's really just a question. Are you willing to do a finger prick, Mrs. Patient? I mean, that's all it takes now for very accurate answers. There is no mental condition that we interviewed Dr. Datis Karazian, who's trained from Harvard. Uh, and I asked him, so what neurological problem or dysfunction would not be from inflammation? And he just looked at me. He's like, what kind of a stupid question is that? He said, and he maintained a very professional, but that look in his eye for a moment
Hmm.
was really, then I started laughing. And he said, no, we think that aside from trauma, head trauma,
Oh.
every neurological complaint is fueled by excessive inflammation.
Speaking of JAMA, Dr. Tom, I read of a study in JAMA. It found people with a high C reactive protein, as we're on the topic of labs. So a high CRP blood level have a 1,700%, so 1,700% increased probability of developing diabetes.
Yeah.
1,700% increased probability of, I just have to repeat that, of developing diabetes. So To segue into labs, of course, you mentioned some of your favorite labs with us. We so appreciate that support. Beyond CRP, though, are you looking at cytokines? What else are you looking at to assess for this low-grade inflammation, particularly in patients who aren't showing symptoms yet?
Yeah, yeah. For me, clinically, the tools that I've used in the past have been looking for antibodies
Hmm.
and elevated antibodies to tissue, human tissue. That's never normal. They're elevated. By definition, you're killing off more cells than you're making.
Hmm.
And I haven't done the cytokine tests have been too expensive for me as a clinician until recently. And the only time I would do the cytokine tests would be with cancer patients. So we get some really good biomarkers that we can compare. And HSCRP, yeah, okay. I mean, that's been around now for 15 years or
Yeah.
so. And it's a good biomarker of aggressive inflammation in the body. It is not low grade inflammation.
Mm.
This is a bonfire. You know, where we live, we can look across the water to the other side and see the mainland. We're on a peninsula, and during the season, it's the season right now, where they burn sugarcane, and they do it at night when there's not so many people traveling around on the roads and all that. And you can just look out across the water and you see bonfires over there, and it's like a few miles across, but you see this big, big, bright light there, and you know it's bonfires.
Hmm.
HSCRP is a bonfire in your bloodstream. It's not a subtle marker. By the time that one is elevated, you've got some major problems going on. You better shift that lifestyle pretty quickly, or something's going to show itself wherever the weak link is in your chain.
So the
So I
antibodies
don't,
you think first pop up first before
yes,
the
yes,
HSCRP.
years beforehand. It
Yeah,
was
as you said.
2009 when I did 28 presentations for the nutrition company Metagenics. They were 8-hour days. I did 28 8-hour days around the world on the topic of autoimmunity. And so I just go through all the science. Every autoimmune disease is there for years. As Let me say that differently. You are on the spectrum of an autoimmune disease for years before you ever have a symptom. Doesn't matter if it's MS or Hashimoto's or rheumatoid or psoriasis, you've got elevated antibodies for years before you ever have a symptom. Killing off tissue, killing off tissue, killing off tissue. That's why, and for 15 years now or more, I've been using antibodies as a primary indicator of this inflammation. But now, focusing more on the low grade inflammation, that category of low grade inflammation, while you feel, quote, fine, antibodies are more important than ever.
And what about just an ANA? I mean, I'm just wondering, Dr. Tom, are you running an ANA? I mean, what kind of antibody panels are you doing depending on someone comes in and they say, I feel good or I feel fine. Let's stick with that, right? I feel fine, but I'm coming to you because maybe there is something in the back. Maybe they're afraid of some kind of family history they might have, or, you know,
Yeah, I'm looking at some notes on my wall over here right now. ANA antibodies from 1988 to 2012, in that 24-year period, they went up from 22 million to 41 million, an 82% increase in the percentage of positive test results.
crazy.
82% in 24 years, which is consistent with this premise of accumulated chemicals from environmental exposure. It's consistent. GMOs came on the market in the mid 90s, right? So they inflamed it even worse. But celiac disease has had a five-fold increase since the 1950s. Coincidentally, that's when that new form of wheat, the dwarf wheat, came on the market in the mid to late 1950s, and farmers began producing more tonnage per acre. And the scientists won the Nobel Prize for this because you could feed millions of people, millions and millions, it saved millions of lives to ship boatloads of wheat over to Africa, to these countries that were having famines, and saved millions of lives, absolutely. But the incidence of celiac disease went up fivefold between 1950 and 2010. Fivefold increase. And it's for the same reason, because more wheat, more toxins. And it's not glyphosate that did it. Glyphosate makes it worse, and the hybrid forms of wheat make it worse, but that's not the problem. The problem is the amount of chemicals that we're exposed to that have your immune system on high alert.
Well said.
Dr. Tom, we've touched on so much between like toxins, diet, gluten, like household cleaning products, and just how these relate back to inflammation and the immune system and the formation of disease over time. And if healthcare practitioners and patients were to, click on this podcast episode right now, and you were to summarize the things that you truly cared about the most from your message, what exactly would you want them to walk away from this conversation with in terms of value and impact?
Oh, thank you. Walking away from the event with the understanding there's this low-grade inflammation when I don't feel bad that I have to start monitoring. So maybe once every year or 2 years, when I get my physical, it's going to be a health physical instead of a disease physical, because right now there is no such thing as a health physical for most people. The blood tests they do look for disease. And so, you can wait and you'll get the disease, but I hope that people will walk away with an understanding that disease begins years before they ever have a symptom. This thing about a 407% increase in the diagnosis of Alzheimer's in 30 to 44-year-olds, that's not a fluke. That's a real pandemic. And nobody's checking that now, nobody. But as you folks know, if you look at the percentage of NeuroZoomer Plus tests that come back negative on a first test, it's pretty rare.
Yes, very slim.
That everybody's inflamed. Everybody's brain is inflamed. And like I talked about inhalation Alzheimer's, because, the olfactory nerves are the only nerves in the body, the only ones that go directly back into the brain with no screening, no filters, no bifurcations, no checks and balance, nothing, just straight back to the hippocampus. Why? Because it was a life-saving mechanism for our ancestors. They had to be able to sniff immediately and identify a threat. Before agriculture, when they were nomads, all of our ancestors were nomads. They followed the herds, right? And back then, they better be able to smell saber-toothed tiger. Or they're always looking for food. They pick something up, they sniff it, they nibble it, then they eat it. They've got to be able to tell, is it safe to eat the food? Those that couldn't tell, they died, and they did not reproduce, and so their lineage did not progress. But those that had developed sense of smell said, no, I'm not going to eat that. They lived, and they passed that on. So our sense of smell, it goes right back to the memory center of the brain. And it's the only nerves in the body that do that. And so, and we talk about that a little bit. And so, we ask why? Oh, this is why. Okay. So it's an inherited protection mechanism for us. Okay. Well, I'm, ever since I got that virus, my smell's not been too good. Well, let's check you for inflammation in your brain. Let's see what's going on there. And you start approaching why this stuff is happening.
So really, in short, you really can't wait till you have symptoms. It's really about being,
That's
proactive
right.
process. Yeah.
That's right. Exactly
Well,
right.
as we close today's episode with Dr. Tom O'Brien, we're reminded of just the critical role inflammation plays in health and disease. Dr. Tom has shared so much invaluable insights on managing low-grade inflammation and the steps that we can take towards better health. We encourage you to explore more about inflammation and Dr. Tom's work by checking out the inflammation equation. And in the meantime, where can our listeners find you, Dr. Tom?
That's the best place right now, but you also can go to my site, thedr.com, thedoctor.com. Just don't spell the word doctor out. And we have lots of handouts and practitioners are more than welcome to download anything you want, put your name on it. It's fine. Change it around any way you like. It's okay. But we hope that you will register for the inflammation equation as an affiliate and send that message out to your whole tribe. And watch out, because what happens after that, you're going to be doing more. You'll get more requests for lab tests, and you'll have more questions about, well, how do I help my son with his attention deficits, or my daughter's seizures? And the drugs are helping, but is there any way that we can reduce the need for the drugs? You're going to get a lot more questions like that as they understand that it's inflammation that's fueling all chronic degenerative diseases, every single one of them.
Well, I'll be sure to link your site in the show notes for you all. And Dr. Tom, we like to end every episode with the question, what does it mean to you to live a vibrant life?
Oh, that's a really nice question. What does it mean? Hey,
It's a big one.
all right, I'll tell you. There's a poem I read many years ago that was on the wall in all of my treatment rooms in my office in Chicago. And this is what it means. So, this is the true joy in life, the being used for a purpose, recognized by yourself as a mighty one, the being a force of nature instead of a feverish, selfish little clod of ailments and grievances, complaining the world will not devote itself to making you happy. I am of the opinion my life belongs to the whole, and it's my pleasure to do for it whatever I can. Life is no brief candle to me. It's a sort of splendid torch that I have a hold of for the moment and want to burn as brightly as possible before passing it on to future generations.
Beautiful. Do you have that memorized, Dr. Tom?
I do.
You have that in front of you. Okay. Yeah.
Oh, that's memorized.
It's worth memorizing. Fantastic.
Yeah, that's from George Bernard Shaw. Just Google "This is the true joy in life" and it'll pop right up.
Well, thank you for sharing, Dr. Tom, and thank you for sharing your expertise with us today and for coming back on the podcast for a second episode. And to our
Thank you
listeners,
very much.
yeah, remember that taking control of your health always starts with being informed. And we really hope that you found today's episode enlightening and that it inspires you to take action and continue to dive deep into finding the root causes of inflammation. And don't forget to go back and listen to our first episode with Dr. Tom, where he talks to us about the research behind gluten and its wide-spanning health effects. And we hope that you join us again next week on the Vibrant Wellness Podcast as we continue to uncover the latest in functional medicine and wellness. And until next time, stay healthy and stay vibrant.
Thank you so much for being here today. Don't forget to leave us a review and subscribe so we can continue to pay it forward together. And remember, the key to longevity is knowledge. Keep learning, growing, and tuning in to the Vibrant Wellness Podcast to discover the latest insights and strategies for optimal health. Join us again next week. Just a reminder, this podcast is for educational and informational purposes and is not a substitute for professional medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. The views expressed by guest and host are their own and do not necessarily reflect the official policy of Vibrant Wellness. As always, consult your healthcare provider before applying any recommendations that you heard here today.